Hello, welcome to Power of 10, a show about design operating at many levels of Zoom, from thoughtful detail through to transformation in organizations, society, and the world. My name is Andy Pillane. I'm a design leadership coach, service design and innovation consultant, educator, and writer. My guest today is Julian Simpson, a London-based writer and director who has worked in film, TV, and audio for the past 25 years. He made his directorial debut annoyingly young in his mid-20s with The Criminal, and more recently worked on Spooks, New Tricks, Doctor Who, and more. He created the Lovecraft Investigations, the Aldrich Kemp audio series, and the Pleasant Green universe. He runs a writer-led company called Storypunk and writes an excellent newsletter about the screenwriting life called Development Hell. And as it happens, Julian and I went to school together and rediscovered each other's work recently due to the magic of the interwebs. Julian, welcome to Power of 10.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So I've wanted to have someone from film on here for a while because, as I can't remember if I told you this, I studied film, video, photography, and this newfangled thing called digital interactive multimedia in the very early 90s. And I didn't go on to be a film director as what I planned, but you did. And
Christopher Nolan, who was at college with you.
Yes, that's right. So he was in the other film course about 2 years ahead of me. And, where is he now? What happened to him? So I listened to an interview with Christopher Nolan. I had this sort of parallel universe, that sort of, sliding doors moment. Like, that could have been me. But, having moved into interactive media and then in digital broadly and design and so forth, and then sort of in service design and everything I do now, that sort of film production model and that kind of way of thinking about a very large group of people, actually, sort of interdisciplinary group of people coming together to collaborate on something, and the kind of process that film has behind it, which is sort of relatively mature now. I'd say very mature now, certainly compared to sort of anything digital, has always fascinated me, and it's stuck with me as a way of thinking about groups of people working together. So I can be really interested to chat to you about that. But I guess first of all, I'm interested to know your pathway to where you are now.
It's kind of weird and atypical, probably. I don't actually know what typical looks like. I left school, didn't go to university, got a crappy job in advertising. That actually, to be fair, at the time wasn't a crappy job. It just feels like a crappy job now. And then decided that I did want to go into film, which I'd kind of always wanted to do, but didn't know how to. Still didn't know how to, but figured I could write a short film and make that, and that couldn't be too difficult. So I wrote something and then put notices up at your film school, actually, for crew. Ended up getting a bunch of students in to crew this movie that we shot in the flat that I was living in. Did enroll at university to get the grant money and the loan money to make the short film, but didn't actually turn up. And ended up having, so our sound guy on that was a student at your place called Asif Kapadia, who went on to make a movie called The Warrior, and then more recently made the documentary Senna and Amy and a couple of others. So he's like an Oscar-winning documentary maker now, but he was just the sound guy on our short film. And he was very good at it. Did that didn't go anywhere at all. Decided to write a feature film, which took about 4 or 5 years to get together, mostly through ignorance and stubbornness and not really understanding that these things aren't meant to happen. Made that, thought that was the ticket to everything, turned out not to be. Had another film set up and kind of all ready to go with Hugh Jackman just before the first X-Men came out. And we couldn't get the finance because no sales company in the world would believe me when I said that Hugh Jackman was going to be a big deal.
What happened to him?
Exactly. Gone the way of Nolan. And that was a weird one because that was going to be Hugh Jackman and Courtney Love, which was going to be quite an odd combo. So that movie fell apart. I went and worked, I did nothing for a while, went and worked in television, kind of worked my way up through television and then moved into audio as well. And now I kind of where I am now.
Right. So what you just described, there's another podcast I listen to called Script Notes. I don't know if you do.
I love
John August and Craig Mazin. It's really brilliant. It's kind of like you could skip film school and just listen to the whole archive of that, I feel. One of the things that you just described there is how incredibly precarious the whole kind of filmmaking process seems to be. It seems to be, for anything to even start to get made, it seems to be to the stars. I'm literally the stars, right? Really have to align, otherwise it just kind of falls apart. I presume is where development hell comes from.
I mean,
you should tell people what development is, actually, because they might not know.
Development is, I don't know if I know what development is, and I'm not entirely sure that anyone knows what it is. It's the bit that happens between having an idea and making something. And it seems to be designed. How I've often described it is that you're in a boat and you're setting off from a dock, which is you having an idea, and you're sailing to a destination. And it's a straight line, and it needn't be that difficult, except that in the way there is a whirlpool, which is development. And if you get sucked into it, you will just be in there forever and you will never get out. So there are brilliant development people around whose job it is to take your idea, help it get better, grow it, make it into something, and send it on its way into production. But there are equally an awful lot of people who, whether they intended to do this or not, have become perpetual development people. So they don't know how to get something moving on. They just know how to keep it going around and around and around and kind of killing it with improvements. And you see that a lot. You end up, so development hell is exactly that. You've got an idea. Someone said we should develop this. They've paid you some money, and now they are never going to be satisfied with it. It is always going to need another iteration before anyone else ever sees it. And you are literally just in hell, kind of rolling this rock up the hill, to mix mythical metaphors.
And so, is this has been around for quite a long time, that kind of process. Is it useful, or is it ripe for disruption, as the our Silicon Valley friends might?
It's ripe for disruption. I mean, it's a tricky one because our Silicon Valley friends have in fact tried to disrupt it. Netflix came in, Amazon came in, and their initial thing seemed to be to not do development. And that can go one of two ways. Sometimes you can end up with a show like, going back, something like The Wire or The Sopranos or Breaking Bad, a show that is so authored and kind of idiosyncratic to its creator that no amount of outside voices are going to improve it anyway. So you just want to get it out there, and with all of its kind of rough edges still intact, because it's worth something. It's valuable in its own right. Yeah. But most of the time what happens is that you end up putting any old crap on the air because there were some famous people attached to it and you don't have a development team. So you're like, oh, well, if this actor and this director and this writer are attached to it, I'm sure it's fine. And you put it on the air. And we've seen a lot of, especially movies on the streamers, where they all feel like terrible vanity projects because there wasn't a development process, because there wasn't anyone going, wait a second, this doesn't make sense.
So one of the things that is different between our two worlds now is this idea of kind of first copy costs, I guess, which is I realized this far too late in my career. I used to sort of make bespoke digital things and try and sell it to someone for as much as I possibly could. And obviously the way to make loads of money is to make something that can be, repeated and duplicated and take a little bit of a lot of things. But I think there's a thing there that, one of the shifts towards as software development and all the rest of it kind of ended up all being online. And I'm of an age where I remember actually making software that, got burnt onto a CD and then pressed in the, tens or hundreds of thousands. And if you screwed it up, then you screwed it up hundreds of thousands of times. But now, of course, that all shifted. And so software gets released, Amazon famously started releasing, new updates every few minutes. And now it's like every few seconds. I mean, it boggles the mind. So the real idea is, we're going to get that stuff out there and we'll find out if we've got, if we've made mistakes, we'll fix it afterwards. And I guess there's a certain amount of that in film. But one of the things that's always fascinated me about film and particularly screenwriting actually, is that screenplays are sort of an unusual writing medium in the sense that they're not really meant to be read by the end audience, right? They're a kind of
No,
a
they're like an
vehicle to
architectural blueprint, aren't they? You're
right,
not,
yeah.
it's the blueprint for the building. It's not the
Yeah.
building itself.
Sort of makes the film though as best they can in different formats. So you've got your, I guess, your treatment and outline. You've got your screenplay, multiple drafts of, and then you've got people storyboarding. And then finally you've got shooting it, which is incredibly expensive. And now you've got post-production, which is also now incredibly expensive. I don't know if those two have switched, that post-production is more expensive than the actual shoot.
It depends. Weirdly enough, I was talking to a virtual production company about an hour ago in Helsinki, and they were talking about, they've got a big LED volume, like the kind of things they shoot Star Wars and Star Wars TV shows and stuff on. So it's an Unreal Engine feeding a 180-degree LED screen.
Yeah, we should probably just going to describe what that is like for people, because in case they don't know,
Yeah.
they are. It's a studio soundstage, but it is just got screens, like wraparound screens everywhere.
So instead of putting green behind it, where you'd ordinarily key in a scene or whatever, or spaceship or whatever, you have an LED panel that goes all the way around. That's huge, that shows you, as an actor, as a director, it shows you where you are. It is the backdrop of the scene, but it also responds to the camera. So if the camera changes its aperture and changes its focal length, then the background will blur accordingly, so it feels like you're in a real place. It doesn't always work, and I think it's overused and kind of lazily used sometimes. But the point was that these guys in Helsinki, they run this thing, and there's like 8 of them. And they all know how all of it works, and they run it, and they do a really great job. They do games, they do movies, they do all of this stuff. You move that setup to LA, and suddenly there are like 100 people there who all need to be paid. And the Finnish guys were basically going, it's just, it's a classic kind of Hollywood problem of they've employed everybody, paid everyone far too much money, and are now going, oh, wow, virtual production's expensive, isn't it? And it's like, well, you guys make everything expensive.
Actually, if people Google Mandalorian, and because that's the way where I saw it first, I think
it's the kind of famous one.
Yeah,
it's used more and more and more now, and we're talking about doing a movie with those guys and just doing, there's bits, you can do. It's much easier to do a car chase, for example. If you're shooting it from inside the car, then your background being on an LED screen is a lot cheaper than having it there for real, and safer, obviously.
Yeah.
But also probably not noticeably an effect.
Yeah.
If you get it right.
The camera, it moves. That's the other thing. There's a kind of like a parallax thing. The camera moves, or the background moves with the camera.
With the
camera's
camera.
head has got a kind of movement track.
Yeah.
It's very cool. I mean, it is an amazing thing to.
It's an amazing
thing,
but it's overused. And so, it becomes something. There was an Amazon show called Citadel, which was, I think, the most expensive television show ever made, largely because they made it, decided they didn't like it, and then made it again from scratch. And they shot the entire thing on one of these stages, even where they didn't need to. So you kind of end up with scenes in an office where you're like, why does this office look weird? And it's just because it's on a screen, but it didn't need to be.
Okay. Where I was getting to with this, though, was
I'm diverting.
Well, no, and it's fine. It's great. But then you've got the edit, right? And then the movie is sort of made all over again in the edit. But I guess you've been through all stages of this. I'm assuming it's like everything else. What would you say is the secret of maintaining some kind of integrity of the thing from start to finish? Because that must be a sort of really. I mean, I think Craig Mazin just said, "Listen, you have to write the best script you possibly can," which is also. I mean, apart from your time, it's cheap in terms of the production, right?
It is the cheapest bit.
Right?
Kubrick always talked about this as one man plus typewriter is the place where you want to be making mistakes because it's the cheapest part. I think it's interesting that Craig Mazin says that. All writers go, write the best script.
Writing's the most important stuff.
Writing is the most important thing. You should talk to the makeup people. They have a different view. But I think it's about intention. I think that I always liken this to architecture, even though I know absolutely nothing about architecture. But it strikes me that there's a blueprint, and then you kind of build a model, and then you start to build the real thing, but then you have to paint it and finish it and do all of this other stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that what you're trying to do throughout that process is maintain the intention of, this is a family home, this is an office for a tech company. You know, there is a building in Vienna that I was told about recently when I was over there. There was a barracks where the entire process fell down because at no point from blueprint to finishing the building did anyone spot they'd forgotten toilets.
No.
Apparently so. This is like way back. This is like 100 years ago or something. But yeah. But so I think it's about maintaining the intention. So the thing that keeps you honest is, what's the film about? And I don't know how that translates to design in an obvious way, but write the best script you can is great. But if you hand that great script to a terrible director, they're going to screw it up. Bad actors are going to screw it up. Bad lighting is going to screw it up. Loads of things can screw it up. It is true that it's difficult to make a good film out of a bad script, but it is not true that it's difficult to make a bad film out of a good script.
Yeah, there's lots of opportunities to screw it up.
Oh, loads. So many. I've seen what bad editing can do to great acting. Only takes getting the scissors in the wrong place to turn a performance that was great on the day into someone looking like an idiot in front of a camera.
So talking of which, there's a lot of trust, right? I mean, actors often talk about trust and trusting the director.
They don't have any choice, to be fair. I mean,
that's true. What do they mean by? I mean, I've got an idea about what I think they mean by that, but what do they mean by that?
They do mean. I mean, I think that when you hear that line in interviews, it's tempting to think that they mean in the moment, on the day. They kind of don't. They mean that they're going to be there, or at least I think what they mean is they're going to be there. They're going to do however many takes of a scene.
Yeah.
And some of those takes will be good in their opinion. Some will be bad in their opinion. And they are trusting the director to know the difference between the two things. They are trusting the director to agree with them about the difference between the two things, which is not always what's going to happen. But they are trusting the director that in the finished product, which they have no influence over beyond standing on the set, you go through the edit, you go through the music, you go through the grade, you go through sound mixing and all of that stuff. They come out the other end. They're trusting that you will have protected their performance and not let them look stupid. And there is an element of trust on the day in terms of what you're asking them to do. They have to trust, you go, there's going to be a dinosaur there. So you've got to, and it's going to be this big. And it's like, so they're trusting you to deliver on what you're promising and to take care of their performance. The most interesting example of this, which no one ever spots, but I find it really interesting, and it was apparent most recently in Masters of the Air, I think it's HBO, the World War II flying show. You have scenes on runways in that show, and in the background of on the runway there are World War II planes with their propellers spinning up, taxiing around, big flying fortresses. Now obviously on the day you can't have that because you're recording dialogue, so those planes are probably, their propellers aren't moving or they're being towed quietly or whatever's happening, but they're not loud. And so as the director, you're saying to the actors, you have to pitch way up, because on the day when this is out there, there'll be a gigantic plane making a load of noise behind you. You would have to shout over it. Even though that noise isn't there now, we still need you to shout over it. It's very difficult for actors to shout louder than they need to project if they're in a group and one person isn't. If one person doesn't do it, everyone feels self-conscious and brings themselves down. And the trust, so there are scenes in, I'm not going to name actors' names, but there are scenes in Masters of the Air where there's one actor who isn't pitching up and three actors who are. And because that one actor wasn't pitching up, they've had to mix the background lower so that he doesn't look weird, and he happens to be the lead. So the other three now look like shouty idiots because they're shouting over no background noise. So that's the trust. It's about going, I'm trusting you to not let that happen.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I guess there's also the sort of emotional. I mean, there's that scene at the beginning of Apocalypse Now with Marty Sheen where he kind of punches the mirror and stuff, and his hand starts bleeding. Yeah. He's actually having in real life, but of the director just kind of letting that go and letting an actor really kind of go deep, I suppose, is perhaps a way to say it, and know that is not going to be taken advantage of as well.
I'm not sure that he wasn't taken advantage of.
Oh,
I haven't seen Hearts of Darkness for a while, but I'm not sure that he knew they were filming, or was he seemed quite drunk.
Well, I think it was one of those things where nobody said cut, right? And so it wasn't very clear.
But it was the 70s, different rules.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, a bunch of different rules. So we talked also about it. So you asked before, you said this thing, I don't know how that kind of parallels to design. And I think one of the things that happens a lot on design projects, and particularly kind of digital things, but also big service design things and stuff, is lots and lots of what's known as alignment meetings, right? Lots and lots of people having meetings where you'd have far fewer of them if enough senior people just went, sorry, I don't know, I don't really understand what we're doing here. What are we doing here? What are you talking about? But nobody does that. And so everyone circles around like dogs that are kind of deciding whether they're going to fight or play.
Yeah.
And then they sort of align and they go, okay, right, this is what it's about. And I think that's one thing. So a lot of that is, there's a lot of corporate jargon about our strategic vision statement and all of that stuff. And everyone's like, what that means, what do they mean? But there's also another thing, I think, particularly in the startup world, where we think this is a thing. We think this is an idea that has some kind of product market fit, but we're not really sure. And you see it quite often. They'll launch something. They'll launch an MVP, minimum viable product. They'll launch a kind of first version of something in that very sort of lean and agile way, just to get something out there. And then they realize, they're kind of searching for it. And I coach people in those environments, and you see it quite often where a platform or a digital product is trying to kind of find its niche, trying to find what its purpose, right?
Yeah.
And the way they do it is to really just put something out there in the world. That doesn't really happen, or at least the thing that's put out in the world presumably is the screenplay, right?
Well, kind of.
Or is there a sort of a stage in between that where more stuff happens and people go, actually this isn't going to work?
So, this development process is a bit like that. Increasingly, we're being asked to produce decks for movies.
Right.
Which would be, I'm assuming, similar to design.
That sounds horrendous. That sounds like a massive shame.
Well, it's got worse. So directors have always had to do what they call a director's vision, which is a completely meaningless document that's given to people who might be greenlighting the movie so that they can pretend to understand what's going on. Exactly what you're talking about. And that's kind of now morphed. You used to write basically an essay about, your thoughts on the movie and how you were going to shoot it. So it was absolutely nonsense, but everyone felt better for having read it. Or not even for having read it, for knowing that it existed. Now they're going, can we get a visual like a deck of basically shots from other movies that will give us an idea of what your movie is going to look like? And again, it's nonsense. But I recently was told that the deck on a movie that we're putting together wasn't considered kind of up to snuff by some of the people that had been looking at it. So I was like, okay, well, show me the decks that they like. And I got sent some, and it's interesting now because the deck that we'd created was an accompaniment to the screenplay. Here's the script, here's visual reference stuff that make you feel like some swatches that will make you feel, designy. And and the decks that I was being told were the kind of the benchmark for this now. I was like, oh, these aren't accompaniments to the script. These are instead of the script.
Right.
these decks now have a few paragraphs on each page or a few lines on each page telling them a story, so they don't have to read the script anymore.
No. Okay.
They get a picture book telling them what the story of the movie is with some pictures of some actors, and that's how they'll be making their decision. And
Right.
I understand that these people think they're busy. They're not, but I understand that they think they are. And I understand that this seems like a good idea, but what's going to happen is that you get further down the line, you end up in the edit, you end up in the expensive bits. We're shooting, we're editing, we're in post-production. And because those people have a say in the finished product but never read the script, you are going to start hearing, this isn't what I thought it was going to be.
Right.
And it's like, well, no, because you looked at a picture book and made a decision.
Is there a shift in the type of people who are, I guess, you're talking about the people who greenlighting a movie is basically saying yes to the budget, right? So
Yeah.
are these, is there a shift in those kinds of people? I mean, you talked about the kind of Silicon Valley folks moving in, but is it just I'm too busy to read this? Or presumably because, good writing is part of the thing, right? That if someone is looking for, can this person tell a story? And are they painting a picture in words in the descriptions? And then is the dialogue good?
I think that so you've got several stratas of folk in the film industry, and the tech people have moved in, but they've kind of moved in at the top.
Right.
So they're mostly not involved with what we were talking about earlier with development, for example. So the development people have basically been the development people, whoever owns the studio, the development people. And they tend to be, in my experience, the Hollywood guys are really good, right? They get all the references. They read stuff very quickly. Their notes are astute. They tend to be, and this is not necessarily a popular thing to say amongst writers, but I think they tend to be the smartest people in the room, often the development people. The problem they have is that they answer to people who may not be the smartest people in the room. So the development person has gone, I've taken your script, I've got some notes, we're all working together in the same direction and we think we've made it better and this is great. And then their boss goes, oh, by the way, now I need it to be a comedy with a talking dog in it. And they have to give that note back. So they seem like idiots, but actually it's somewhere above them is an idiot. And at the moment, we've gone away from comedies with talking dogs and we're into, we had the tech guys came in, Netflix and Amazon came in and they were going, Netflix specifically were going to disrupt. Their whole thing was, we're going to change how things are done. We're fast. We, move fast and break things. We're the guys from Silicon Valley who are going to transform the movie industry.
We've got all the data too.
Yeah. And specifically the television industry, we've got the data, we know, blah, blah, blah. They charged in, they made some good shows because they didn't really get too involved with development and stuff. They did make some good stuff. And then they slowly turned into movie studios because they started to go, well, hold on, we need a movie star in this and we need an established writer or an established director. And they basically became all of the obstacles to getting a TV show or film made that previously existed began to exist at Netflix and got to the point now where they're going, what if we had adverts and what if we didn't release stuff in box sets, but what if we released shows weekly with commercials in them? And it's like, well, congratulations, you just invented network television. I thought you were
all over again.
I thought you were trying to do something different.
Yeah.
But the other thing that they do, which might be to do with your thing about kind of putting stuff out there and then seeing how it works, they spent a lot more money than they needed to on a lot of things. They're throwing money at things was their solution to a lot of problems.
Yeah. It might change. I mean, now that money is no longer free, I think that's probably one of the things that's going on. One of the things that's also interesting, I think, is a reverse of this. I've always, there's this whole idea of lean, right? And this idea that you can put the minimum just enough in there, out there, or invest just enough to get something out there to test it, right? And obviously film, particularly in the shooting moment, film's kind of incredibly fatty, It's not lean at all. You know,
No.
it's you shoot an enormous amount at great expense with a lot of people over the course of, you know, days and weeks, and most of it never ends up in the final edit. So you have, you know, I don't know what the shooting ratios used to be when people were shooting on film. What, 10 to 1, 15 to
5
1,
to
something
1,
like that?
5 to 6. I mean, it depends on who the director was. There's a great story I heard from a guy who was a driver who had driven Hitchcock on one of his last films. It was shooting over here, I think, at Pinewood. And they wrapped on a Friday, and he had to drive Hitchcock to the edit after wrap. And it says Friday night, and he said to him, Mr. Hitchcock, when will the edit be finished? And Hitchcock said Monday. And the reason he said Monday is because he basically went, we take the clapperboards off, we take the markers off the strip of film, stick them together, we're done. I don't shoot anything I don't want. So we select the best takes, but there's no shot. There was very few shots in a Hitchcock movie that weren't seen.
Yeah, I've heard a similar thing about Clint Eastwood actually as well. That
It does the same
said,
thing,
you know,
and John Huston.
someone actor sort of went, so, you know, maybe do a second take, and he was just like, why would you want to waste everyone's time? Okay, all right. There's some trust there. So, but now, you know, and particularly, you know, with digital cameras everywhere, it's enormous, right? You were talking about Fincher, you know, you were talking about
Fincher's on, I mean, 100 to 1 or something is his shooting ratio. He's often doing 100 takes. I think so
that's takes or multiple cameras though, right? Too. So that's amounts of things that got shot compared to the ratio. What I'm saying, so 100 to 1 is like we shot 100 minutes of something for 1 minute of something that ended up in this.
Yes, and that just requires. I mean, it's interesting. I did hear on Fincher's films that he uses the delete button on the camera.
Oh, yeah.
So he does go over and over again. He'll do 100 takes, but he doesn't keep 100 takes. If it's bad, he just deletes it.
Wow. That's like a bunch of teenagers taking a selfie these days, isn't it? That kind of thing that shifted of people take a photo and then immediately look at it and then decide to take another one. Yeah.
But I think one of the reasons he does that, it feels quite final, it feels quite extreme, but actually his editor probably doesn't want to go through 100 takes.
No.
It's like, that's a time-consuming and expensive process. If you know this take is bad, don't bother anyone with it. Get rid of it. But I quite like that, actually. There's always an insurance thing. There's always a kind of insecurity of going, but what if there was some nugget in there that I've missed? And I think that there isn't. Just chuck it, get rid of it, and work with what you've got. It's fine.
Yeah. I would like to turn to writing, actually, because in your newsletter, in Development Hell, you've written a couple of things recently. One was about writing slowly, and the other one was about sort of notes and outlines. And the writing slowly thing, well, actually talking of a thing that I think everyone can relate to that will be listening to this, you talk about the shared fiction of deadlines, and I'm going to quote a bit. I'm going to sanitize the F word into something else.
Okay, cool.
And we say, you know, we need to get the draft to Bob before he goes on holiday. Screw Bob. Bob's not sitting on a beach reading my script. And more to the point, if that week Bob is spending in Maui his time I could use to make the script better, then double screw Bob and his pina colada. I very, very much enjoyed that particular section of this.
I mean, I kind of assume, it's weird, isn't it? I assumed everyone else's deadlines were real.
No, I've always, not always, but I've realized at some point that this is just a made up cascade of kind of deadlines.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are, you know, in film, if you're shooting, and I found this equally frustrating when I've been directing television shows, and writers who may have the same attitude as me about deadlines generally, they'll go, you know, you go, but we're shooting this tomorrow. So if you're going to change it, it needs to be changed today. And then they don't, because they never hit deadlines. And you're like, this was a hard deadline. This wasn't a fictional deadline. We're literally standing on set with some actors. But those are the only deadlines in film, I think, that mean anything. Everything else is a shared fiction. It's probably done with the best of intentions oftentimes. But it very often is, you know, this guy's going on holiday. Can we get him the script before he goes? And it's like, No.
He's not going to read it on holiday. No, I've heard all sorts of versions of that. And I think there's also that cascading thing of like someone, big boss says, I want to see this by the end of April. And the next person goes, okay, so we need this by mid-April. And the next person
So
goes,
we
well, we
can
need it
check
by
it
the end
before
of
he
it.
sees it.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, so now we've got only 2 weeks to do this. Are you sure big boss wants us to rush this in 2 weeks?
So I've got a thing where I have a show with a streamer at the moment, and we have quite a few gatekeepers in between me and the kind of final decision guy, and they're all good gatekeepers, but he's like, so when can I see a draft? And you're like, I don't know, like 4 weeks or whatever it is. And then as soon as he's off the call, other people are like, I need to see it before he sees it.
Okay.
And you're like, okay, so guys, you need to tell him it's going to be 6 weeks. Because what I'm not doing is doing the work in half the time so that 3 people can look at it before he sees it.
Yeah.
He's going to get it later because I'm going to take the same amount of time over the work, and then you guys will want to see it before he does. So you're eating into his time, not my time.
How well does that work?
It has mixed results. I mean, the thing is that ultimately, the thing I actually really like about the US versus the UK is that if you, within reason, if you go, this is how long this work is going to take, and the reason it's going to take that long is because I'm going to do the best job I can with it. Americans go, we get it, fine. English people go, no, I need it. We still need it on Tuesday.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'm surprised by that.
Yeah. I mean, not all of them. I mean, I just, no,
that's all right. You can write off my home country. Britain's broken for a reason. Yeah, I know. The notes and outlines thing was interesting because, as you know, I think I'm part of this sort of the PKM, the sort of obsidian cult of people who kind of
I did
have
not
this
know
digital gardens thing. Now, I'm not particularly a sort of personal knowledge management person. I do use it because I like to just have everything in kind of one space. I don't do a massive amount of kind of interlinking of all my notes and stuff. And one of my previous guests, Jorge Arango, has written a whole book on this. But I was interested because you describe, well, maybe you can talk about that particular thing about sort of describing you sort of following the process and then ditching it and kind of doing it differently.
What, the PKM process?
No, you were following the kind of notes and outlines and doing all of that stuff. And then you sort of ended up in this space where you're like, oh, hang on, I'm just going to kind of write it all over again.
Oh, I think I love the idea of planning, and it never quite works out for me. And I always find that the process, the development process, I guess, but the process of television and film always requires a plan. They're like, you've told them the idea, and then they're like, great, can you now write that out in 1 page so that we can read it and show it to other people? And then that they like that, so they're like, great, now can you write it out in 10 pages? Just expand and expand and expand until the point that we get to a screenplay. And I find that process kills the creativity for me, because if I've figured everything out before we start the screenplay, the screenplay for me is a process of kind of exploration of an idea and of characters. And if there's something to explore because we've mapped it all, then I don't really have very much interest in doing it. And weirdly, it doesn't make it easier.
Does it just become typing? I mean,
it becomes typing, but it becomes trying to fit, because the menu is not the food. It's I'm trying to find it works on paper, but when we start putting people in this scene and get them to talk to each other, they don't seem to want to do the thing we were hoping they were going to do. And I can force them to do it, but it'll feel forced.
So you just touched on that thing that lots of writers talk about, and I kind of know from a different thing actually from my D&D and from other things actually I've written other, which is this idea that I heard Ian McEwan talking about this actually as well, that you have an idea for a scene and you obviously know the characters that are going to be in that scene, and you know whatever the tension or opposition there usually is in a scene to set it up and give it its fuel. But when you start writing, the characters, these fictional people inside your head, seem to have a life of their own. Is this a thing that is true for you?
It is, but I think I love talking about it in those terms, but it's kind of nonsense and it's sort of pretentious. What actually happens, I think, is that you get into a sort of flow where you've had the 1,000-foot view on it and you've gone, this is what the scene's about, this is where it starts, this is where it ends. Like you say, these are the conflicts, these are the tensions between these characters, and now I'm going to put them in this prison cell or in this police station or up this mountain, and I need them to get from A to B to C through this scene. And you start it, and authors and writers will always go, and then the characters kind of take over. What actually happens is you just get into the weeds of it and you have a better idea. A little thought in the back of your head's like, what if he hit her? What if this person jumped off this cliff? What if this person turned out to not be who we thought they were? You just have better ideas. And it's the ideas that you get from being at kind of eye level with the thing versus having the kind of, the drone view of it, which you had when you were outlining or planning or even just thinking about it. And I was doing this morning, I was writing some stuff, and I planned it out quite meticulously. It's a redraft. I've even told this story a number of times before. And I knew exactly where this scene ended. And yet that one line of dialogue occurred to me that changed something, and then another thing happened, and then suddenly there was a different character at the end of the scene. And I was like, this is how it should be. But I couldn't have known that before it happened. But I don't think it's mystical. I just think it's that your brain is going into a different gear and is pulling. I'm going to use the PKM analogy a little bit, but it's pulling all of the stuff in.
Yeah.
It's going, what is hovering around in the back of our minds that we can suddenly find a link to and drag it into this scene? What connection, what synaptic connection have we just made?
So this is the thing, and it goes back to that kind of process or the planning thing you were talking about before, that I think is really that kind of reflective practice, as Donald Chern described it, where I think got lost. Like in the design world, there's been this whole thing about design thinking and, this kind of separate bit of design. And it sort of got morphed into this idea that we can do some design thinking up front and then we just go on and kind of do the production, as if there's no thinking happening while you're actually doing the doing. And I think one of the things I really like about writing is there's no second draft without the first draft. Right? You really kind of have to just go through that process and let yourself write some junk and then kind of go back. And also that kind of classic thing was by the time you've got to the end of it, you actually know what you're writing, what it is you're writing about, and then you sort of go back and fix up.
But isn't this a bit like design in terms of, like, I've always imagined that if you're talking about industrial design, if you're talking about factories, that there must be a point at which thinking stops because you need the widget to get designed to go through the production line in a particular way.
There is, and I think it's perhaps one of the differences between sort of craft. If I sort of take I've got a little kind of handmade cup, espresso cup here, and there's that thing where you're making a thing with your hands and you're getting that immediate.
So that's what I was going to say. The kind of the artisanal, the kind of craft thing, which is kind of how I think of what I do, is exactly that. It's like we can draw a table and we can, but then we get the wood and we start to do whatever you do if you're making a table with wood, and it's going to direct us in perhaps a different way, or you're going to make a mistake and have to course correct in a different way.
Yeah. No, I think there is definitely there's quite a lot of parallels there in design and certainly in digital, because one of the things you're doing is you make a thing. You might even test it with real people, but certainly you make a thing and you're looking at it as you're designing it and going, oh, actually, maybe not like that. And there's a thing I call of sort of designing yourself into a corner where you have this utopian, well, it's actually more of a sort of platonic ideal of something, of this form of something in your head. And as soon as you make it manifest as a tangible thing, whether that's in words or a sketch or something, you're like, oh, and now I see that's never going to work at all. Right? I'm going to have to do that differently. But because your brain leaves out all these kind of essential bits.
And also because nothing's ever as good as the original idea.
No, exactly. No, I used to love doing art at school, actually. And I used to love the kind of preliminary sketches or the bit of painting where I'd done the sort of background ground or sort of wash, and then I'd sketched out what the painting was going to be, the outlines out of it. And then I hated the rest because it only got worse after that, right? Up until that point, it had all this potential for being this amazing thing. And then I gradually just made it worse and worse and worse the more
But
I
I
painted.
think that's what happened. I think that's what we're talking. That's the process of filmmaking in a lot of ways. So there's this thing of people saying the script is written 3 times. It's written in the screenplay, it's written in the shoot, and it's written in the edit.
Yeah.
I don't think that's true because the script, certainly in an ideal world, the shoot and the edit aren't starting from a blank page.
Yeah.
So it's not there. It's not even a rewriting process. It's a process of evolution. And you stand on set with your script and your actors, and they say the lines, and you suddenly go, "Oh, I don't need that line of dialogue because you're doing it with a look. I don't need that anymore." So you can start to kind of scrub that out. And then you get into the edit and you're like, actually, you know what? They don't even need the look because we can cut to that and then cut back to them and we can cut that look out completely. And it's a process of refinement. And I don't necessarily think it gets worse. I definitely think the writing process is kind of what you're talking about with painting, wherein you kind of go, I've got a great idea for a film. And by the time you've written fade out, you're like, I hope people will still work with me after they've read this. Because that does get worse and worse and worse. You just kind of go, I've got this great idea. And you walk around with it for a while and it's like, this is still brilliant. I'm working on one at the moment. And I made the mistake of pitching this brilliant idea to a movie stars company, and they then went to the movie star and the movie star loved it, and they came back and went, we'd love you to write this. He's really, really excited about it. And I was like, cool, I'm super excited about it too. Sat down, went, right, what actually is it though? I was like, oh, it's one line, isn't it? It's not an actual story. It's not a thing. And they're like, they're constantly going like, how's it going? He's very excited to read it. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you.
I hope they never watch or listen to this podcast now. So, there's so much we could talk about because you've got this whole audio thing that you do. I'm interested by the turn to audio actually for you. Is it simply that it's easier to get audio stuff made? It's cheaper, presumably, to make an audio.
Actually, it's a lot cheaper. I don't have a terribly difficult time getting stuff off the ground at BBC Audio anymore because I've won a couple of awards and they generally like me. As long as I don't try and do more than one thing a year, they pretty much let me. But getting other audio stuff off the ground is very, very hard. It's as hard to get finance as anything else, even though it's a smaller amount of money. It's like a short film. There's no returns on it really. So it's hard to kind of get going. What I like about it is that audio, the way we do it at least, is entirely artisanal, if I'm saying that right. When I write, so take for example Aldrich Kemp, which third season of Aldrich Kemp I'm writing at the moment. I'm on the 3rd episode of 5. Only the producer has read the first 2 episodes. Radio 4 will never read the script. They never even get sent it. So it's a complete collaboration amongst equals who know each other to get this thing right. I can cast whoever I want as long as we can afford them, whoever I like to do and I can write whatever I like. We then go on. We don't go into a studio ever on these things. We record on location. So we then go to some kind of interesting place that will sound like where it's meant to be with a bunch of actors who everyone gets on with each other. We, bring sandwiches. It's not an expensive production and we'll record. And you can record 5 episodes in 5 days. It's really not a particularly long process. The guy who recorded it is also the guy who edits it and the guy who does all the post-production and sound mixing and stuff. So he's there all the way through and he understands exactly what we're going through at any given point. And then I get it bounced back to me over and over and over again. And he and I get on Zooms and we talk stuff through, or I go to his place and we talk stuff through and figure it out and figure out the music and all of that stuff. And the end result of what we do gets broadcast on Radio 4 without any interference whatsoever.
That's amazing.
So it's a beautifully kind of craft process that hasn't got any of the guardrails or interference that you get from movies and television.
And why is that? Is it just because of the amount of money that is not involved, or is it
I
just
actually
different
think
medium?
I think it is, because I think it would be
Culture
different.
of radio.
I've sold something recently to Audible that we'd already made, and I really like the guys at Audible, but I get the impression if I was to go to them and go, I've got an idea, it would be more like a TV or film process. I think it's the BBC. I think it's how they've always done it. And there's one pitfall to the entire process, which is you get to do exactly what you want to do, and no one will stop you. There's lawyers. There's a legal process involved.
But you can drive it off a cliff, and no one.
I can drive it off a cliff, and they'll never hire me again.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, you know.
But that's quite. I mean, that is the risk I'm happy to take. Because then it's your mistake. Because other people in film and television, other people drive it off the cliff, and you get the blame.
So those other people, these days there's a lot of talk about, is AI going to kill kind of film and TV and all the rest of it? And there have been several attempts to get a ChatGPT et al. To kind of write a screenplay, and they're not. I'm pretty
sure it already has, and I'm pretty sure I've seen some of those movies. But
yeah. Well, I mean, this is the thing, though, right? What will it do? It will kind of probably head towards a kind of mediocre middle of sort of average screenplay based on thousands of other examples of movies. But that kind of sounds like the Marvel universe to me, anyway, right?
I would never in a million years besmirch Marvel, but I think that if the criticism of AI writing screenplays is it'll turn out a bunch of mediocre rubbish that's based on a whole bunch of other things, then there's definitely a huge market for it.
Then we're really there.
It'll be enormously successful. I use it. I mean, I think someone much smarter than me said early in the development of this stuff, and it's, the development's obviously very, very fast, that before you get replaced by AI, you'll be replaced by someone who can use AI. And so I use it for research. I use it for knocking things around, and I find it helpful. It's not that it can't write a screenplay. It can certainly understand one. I fed it a screenplay because I was looking for a one-page pitch for something I'd already written, and I hate writing pitches after I've written the thing. And I fed it a screenplay, thinking it won't know what the hell it's looking at. And it was like, boom, there's the one page. I was like, oh, that's pretty good. You've missed a couple of points, but I can tidy that up in 5 minutes. That's good to go.
Yeah.
But I think that it's like it can paint pictures, like with DALL-E and Midjourney, you can do paintings, and I'm sure it can do design, and it can do a lot of things. It doesn't have a sense of self. It doesn't have a sense of an authorial voice. It can copy one, but it's not genuine. Yeah, but it's an uncanny valley thing.
Yeah,
but it's through history, the artists that we've admired, whether they be novelists or screenwriters and directors or actors or painters, they've all had their own kind of unique experience and point of view. I think there may well be significant AIs that will have a body of work that is interesting, but I don't think that AI as a kind of melange can do that. The bigger question for the human race at the moment, I'm writing a film about AI, so I'm thinking about this quite a lot, is why we are asking AI to do things that we like doing versus getting it to do things that we don't want to do. Why is it bothering to learn how to paint a picture if it can't do my tax returns?
Yeah, exactly. No, it's to make kind of a bunch of people very wealthy. No, I think there's a very good questions around that. It does seem kind of rather strange that humans end up doing the drudge work, and AI is doing all the stuff that was supposed to, the artistic, creative stuff that was supposed to free our time up.
What I was promised was, a universal basic income. No one needs to work, and you can spend your entire time painting and reading books. And it turns out that actually AI can do that, but we've got to carry on working.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, so look, we've come up to time. The show is named after this film by Ray and Charles Eames called Powers of 10, which is about the relative size of things in the universe. And I'm springing this on you, I've realized, because there's
Wow.
one question at the end, which is what one small thing is either overlooked or could be redesigned that would have an outsized effect on the world?
Oh, I don't know about an outsized effect, but in my daily life, the thing that most grinds my gears, I don't know if this is true where you are black bin bags.
Okay.
I'll tell you why. I
That's
can't
very specific.
fathom why the bin bag that is the right size to fit in our kitchen bin is not sufficiently strong to hold the contents of said bin.
Okay.
I can't
All right.
figure out why everyone's getting away with making crappy bin bags. So but it's not going to change the world. I appreciate that.
It would change.
I have
I've spilled the contents of my bin enough over the years.
someone to come up with something. Would be good.
Well, that'll do.
I tell you what, I think I've just bought Hasselblad, digital Hasselblad, the new one.
Oh yeah.
And this is sort of shocking, actually. The thing that I didn't think I cared about turned out to be one of the things that I really like about it, which is that instead of using these, which I'm showing to
Yeah,
camera
the
now,
SD cards. Yeah.
SD cards, it's got internal SSD. It's got an internal solid state drive of 1 terabyte.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know why every camera doesn't have that.
That's a very good question. All right, well, we'll leave others to give us the answer to that one.
Yeah.
Where can people find you online?
They used to find me on social media, but I think life's too short. So I am development hell at Substack, and Cartoon Gravity, all one word, .com is my kind of scrapbook thinking space, nonsense area. That's pretty much it.
I'll put some links to the Lovecraft Investigations, Pleasant Green, your IMDb profile, where you've got a very sort of Javier Bardem photo, picture on there.
Yeah. I think that might be the one picture I've ever used for anything. When people go, "Would you have a picture?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, there it is."
Yeah, here's one for me 30 years ago.
Exactly.
Julian, thank you so much for being my guest on Power of 10.
Thank you very much.
You have been watching and listening to Power of 10. You can find more about the show on Polane.com, where you can also check out my leadership coaching practice, online courses, and sign up for my newsletter, which is very irregular, called Doctor's Note. If you've got any thoughts, put them in the comments or get in touch. You can find me as @apolane on pkm.social on Mastodon. You'll find me on LinkedIn and on my website as well. All the links will be in the show notes. Thanks for listening and see you next time.